So I used an iPad throughout nursing school. And the thing about it is, like, for a good chunk of nursing school, maybe even almost a quarter of it, I was actually using exclusively an iPad because my laptop that I had, I think it had a hard drive failure or something like that. But so it essentially just stopped working. And so I was a broke college student at that point, and I didn't have the money at that point to buy a new computer. And so I was just thinking, like, well, let me see how far an iPad can actually carry me through nursing school. And interestingly enough, it actually did a fair bit. It actually carried me a lot further than I had thought it would have. I was obviously really grateful and happy that it did at that point. But I also noticed it had a fair bit of shortcomings. The plus side is a lot of those shortcomings have actually been fixed with newer iPads and kind of like more software updates that that have happened, new apps and whatnot. And so a lot of those shortcomings you're not going to have. But let's actually talk then about what my experiences were like using an iPad or using a tablet as my primary computer or primary device for nursing school, and whether or not it's a good idea for you to probably do something like that as well. Before I get started though, if you have not already subscribed to the channel, don't forget to go ahead and hit that subscribe button and also hit the thumbs up. And feel free to share this video with anybody who you think, that might benefit from seeing it. How I'm actually gonna handle this is I'm actually gonna split it up into pros, some cons, my general thoughts on it, and recommendations. So let's start off with some of the pros that I noticed. And the first one was that it was, an iPad actually really wasn't a bad way to take notes. So there's a couple ways you can handle it, right? Nowadays, with the newer iPads and especially the softwares and like the styluses that have come out, you can actually just write it out. A lot of those softwares, they're getting so much better in terms of like they can even read it. You can actually search through it. Some can actually, as you write it, if your penmanship is good enough, it can actually then put it into like text as well. It does a really good job. They've gotten a lot better at that. The other thing you can do with these tablets, and that was actually the route I went, is that you can actually get a Bluetooth keyboard connected, prop it up, which was part of the reason why I had this one that I got, and this was an OtterBox, because I could then actually prop it up. Right, and then have my keyboard right here, and then I could just type notes, whether it be in class or I used Quizlet a lot. I made flashcards a lot, so I would do that a fair bit. So it was actually really good. Really good at keeping notes, and also I already mentioned this, the second part really, which was that it was really good in terms of keeping notes organized, because instead of having a ton of paper all over the place, I could have it all in my tablet. Nowadays you can sync it all through the cloud, whether that's iCloud, Dropbox, or another platform as well. Because you don't have so much clutter around, number three is that it's actually easier to then carry, stuff all over the place, because there were situations where really, once I had this folded up, I could then, it might be just this and maybe like a couple of notebooks like this and, like maybe like one textbook or something like that. And then that was it. I didn't have to carry a bunch of big stuff at times, and that made things really nice because I wasn't carrying so much stuff with me. Like it actually made it easier on my back as well, because I'm sure if you have been a student for an extended period, especially if you're carrying a lot of heavy stuff in your backpack that you really shouldn't, you know how much it can really start hurting you in the lower back if you're not careful. And because it was synced up in the cloud, I never really had to worry about losing anything. Actually, I'm a big proponent of working in the cloud because, like I mentioned, I had a computer that failed on me. I wish that was the first time I've had a computer fail on me, but it actually wasn't. I've had a couple of laptops that have actually failed on me before. And when that happened years ago when I was in my undergraduate, that was like in the age of like, you know, you would send a document to yourself, like through email. So this was before, like, you know, your Dropbox, your OneDrives, your Google Drives got really big. And if you failed to do that, you know, if you just lost your hard drive, then you were kind of SOL, if you will. And so now the way I'm set up, and it's so much easier nowadays with how, with kind of like where the tech is that pretty much all my stuff lives in the cloud. I could lose my laptop, I could lose this iPad, I could lose my phone, I could lose this desktop, and literally buy a new one, enter in my information, all of it gets synced, and I'm taken care of that way. The next thing is that you might actually be able to save money on some supplies. Now, I didn't really take a good advantage on this. I think it's gotten better over the years, but if you're buying a lot of, instead of physical textbooks, the digital versions can sometimes be cheaper as well. Like I said, don't have to buy a bunch of notebooks or paper all over the place. So that can potentially help there. I will preface this by saying that this can be a double-edged sword, because if you're going all digital, the downside to that is that you're not going to be able to buy like the used textbooks. And at times the used textbooks can be so much cheaper. I didn't really do this a whole lot, you know, but I know some students who they'll just buy their textbook instead of buying it used from an Amazon, an eBay, or the school bookshop. They'll actually buy it from from a upperclassman that's either out of the class or another classmate that, you know, not continuing with the program or whatever the case might be. And so the seller ends up getting more money than they would have if they sold it back to the bookshop, or if they, you know, but at the same time, the buyer, you know, gets it cheaper than if they tried to buy it from the bookshop. So that's kind of some tips and tricks to keep in mind. I already mentioned before that it can really save your back as well, just from not having to carry so much physical materials around. But there are some cons, right? So I mentioned some pros, but there are some cons to having this tablet. So the first one is that even though things have gotten nice with, with the stylus to where you can write everything out and, you know, you can save it in the cloud, is that there's nothing quite like being able to lay out your notes across a table. So maybe you're trying to compare some stuff that you have written. Some of these note-taking softwares can be decent at it, and there are kind of some workarounds you can do for that. But in terms of emulating that, having your notes spread across and being able to kind of shuffle things around that way, it doesn't quite replace that, at least as far as I'm concerned. The second thing is that you can spend, and I did notice this as well, is that I would spend a decent amount of time kind of customizing, and then, you know, you're spending time customizing and, you know, instead of actually studying, you know. And to be fair for when it comes to like tablets like this, is that you can run across the same issue on paper, right? And so like if you've ever seen like a classmate's notes or a classmate's textbook where there's like 20 different highlighter colors all around, they've used sticky notes and they've tab dividers and they've divided everything else. Now granted, there's an argument to be made that there are some people who that benefits them and they, that helps them in terms of studying and learning the material. But I think there's also some arguments that could be made that you can spend so much time with the customizing, with the making it look quote unquote pretty, if you will, that you then don't spend enough actually looking at the material and trying to get all that material to soak in. Third issue with this is that tech problems. Now, granted, I will be honest, I did not have as much of an issue with the iPad as I've had with some of the other like Android tablets and everything else. So didn't have that much of an issue with it, but there were still some issues or some app issues, some software issues every now and then that could creep up. And honestly, that's just kind of the way tech rolls, right? Technology is fabulous. It is awesome. I am a tech junkie. I love every bit of it. But when it doesn't work or doesn't work the way it should, it is frustrating as heck. And so that is something to keep in mind if going the iPad route, or if you're wanting to go like maybe exclusively or primarily on the iPad route. Number 4 is that you can run out of battery, and so which may or may not be an issue. I mean, there's plugs all over the place. You're in a lecture hall, you might run into some issues there, but as long as you charge it ahead of time, you could probably, depending on your use case, probably go through an entire, like a school day with it, or you maybe like have to charge it in between if you have like weaker batteries or an older iPad. So I think, I don't think that's necessarily a deal breaker per se in that specifically, but that is something to keep in mind. The 5th con for this, and to me, this is probably the biggest one, is that as far as I am concerned, an iPad or most tablets do not replace a full computer. Like I think you have exceptions, like like maybe your Surface Book or your Surface Pro that are literally like a full Windows or a full Windows PC experience, but in a tablet form, or maybe like your 2-in-1 like Windows laptops where like the top comes out, or and then you have like pretty much like a tablet, and so I think those are different. I think those are different animals, and they kind of have like some pros and cons that would be for another video. But if you're looking at just like your iPads or your pure tablets, they don't quite replace the full Windows laptops. They don't quite replace the full MacBooks, your MacBook Pros and of the world. And honestly, while there are some nice little workarounds, I think for most of you, I think you might end up getting frustrated at some point or another for whatever reason. And that was the issue that I started running into. There were certain softwares or certain softwares that, of course, I needed a full laptop for it. There were, I might be doing like I might be on a certain website. Maybe there's a certain application or whatever that just wasn't gonna work well with a tablet that needed an actual laptop to be able to run it. And so those were my frustrations, like for sure. I think for vast majority of things, you can probably, in school anyway, you can probably have a workaround for it. But even sometimes those workarounds can be, sometimes they can be very clunky as well. That then kind of moves into my recommendation, which is if you have to pick between a tablet, or specifically an iPad, or like an actual laptop. Like if you only had funds for one or the other, I would definitely pick the laptop. And the reason why I would pick the laptop is because for the most part, the laptop can always do everything the tablet can do. Maybe functionally different, but for the most part, it can do everything the tablet can do, but the tablet really can't do everything the laptop can do. If you are wanting a situation where you can get the best of both worlds, then probably checking out maybe the Surface Book, and I'll put a link to that in descriptions below, where that is full Windows laptop experience, but the screen comes off and it ends up being, you can then use it as a tablet. It comes with a stylus, then you can write, you can do all of that stuff. And then when you're ready to, when you need it in a laptop, full laptop mode, pop it back in and you're ready to roll. So definitely check that out. I will preface by saying that it's a nice piece of tech. It's really nice, but it is definitely a premium and a premium tech, and you are going to pay premium price for it. But definitely check that out in the link below. And you can see that in the link below, and then I'll take you to the actual to that tablet. Or to that laptop, I should say. So what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with, with kind of some of the points that I made? Let me know what your thoughts are. Maybe what, some of your use cases are for an iPad during nursing school. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will catch you very soon in that next video.